Salinas.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Coastside Fire Protection District Board of Directors Special Board Meeting, October 26, 2022. Roll call, please. Jean?
Sorry, I could not find my unmute button there for a moment. I apologize. President Burke.
Here.
Director Cockrell.
Here.
Director Sherrill. Director McKinney. Director Stockman.
Here. Director McKinney is on his way. We'll bypass the Pledge of Allegiance if there are no objections. Are there any initial public comments? Hearing none, let's go on to item 5, new business, and that is a review and to discuss the strategic plan. Chief Cox?
Thank you, President Burke. This was brought up last month at the regular board meeting, and the board had requested some special session time to talk a little bit more about the direction and kind of intent from the board on the strategic plan.
And Cindy, I know you brought it up, and I would like to start off with you and ask if you have some suggestions, directions on how we might proceed this afternoon. And let me just say that depending on what this discussion leads us today, this may be a short meeting, a long meeting, or it may be continue to another meeting, depending on which direction we take on this. But this is not subject to, we have to do something right here today. It's a discussion. With that, Cynthia, what do you?
Thank you very much. When we addressed this last month at the board meeting, we talked about approaching a review, a refresh of our strategic plan, which was last reviewed in 2021 in December. And then subsequent to that, there was a request to have this meeting to really talk about how would we go about, what do we have in mind? Is there buy-in from the board to go forward with a strategic planning refresh? So that's the purpose of this meeting. It's not to do the strategic plan. It's to talk about what the general categories we'd like to address might be, so that we can understand our approach. We can develop a consensus-based approach to all of this, and then we can really get serious about the topics and the specific content in December, or whenever the decision is to do this in the near future. Does that sound like a good way forward? All right, great. Well, first of all, let's express gratitude that we're even in this position, that we have, the board has brought us to the point that we have financial stability, which was not always the case. And gratitude for the fact that we have first-rate equipment, which was not always the case. And that has taken years of time and effort and commitment on the part of the board and the staff here and the community, and we're grateful for that. And because now we're in this place of strength, we can now really afford to take a look at what our strategic plan is and think a little more out of the box and not in an emergency mode to what would we like to accomplish going forward. So we have, and also I'd like to thank you for the conflict-free civility with which we conduct our meetings. You know, I think the experience of the board in the past was not always as collegial as it is today. And we are grateful because it lets us get our work done. And that's what we have to do. So because of your excellent stewardship, we now have the opportunity to look at this big picture and refresh our strategic plan. Our strategic plan right now is succinct. It's on 4 pages. The background, there's 5 sections of it. There's background, mission, vision, values, and initiatives. And initiatives are really the tactical plans that have been accomplished and that are coming up next, or we'll talk about the timing of these things. The background section is fine, but it's not all that current. Like anything else, every document ages. And if you go to coastsidefire.org, what you'll find in those on the website, which by the way, Chief Cox, thank you so much work is done on that. And the writing on the website that describes the background is outstanding. It's concise, it's informative. And I think we should look at this background in light of what's on the website and perhaps refresh it. There is one section that I just want to bring up just because it's fun to talk about. This says in the original version, most district revenue is derived from local property taxes and a base parcel fee of $35. And then if you go to the website, it says that fee has never been, it's been 4 years since that fee was increased. Is that right?
Yes, if I could say,
Sure.
that fee was not a vote of the board, it was a vote of the population, it was a public vote,
Yes.
and to change it required again a public vote. So it's,
Well, that's something to think about. I suppose it's not the worst because we've grown, so there's more parcels. But it's amazing to me that the foundational structure of the financing is something that hasn't changed in 4 years. But again, congratulations for doing the best you could with the resources you have. So that's really thoughts on the background, on the mission, on the vision, and on the values. They're just really, they're fine in this document, but they're better stated on the website. So we could just freshen that language. One of the things that again does pop out to me is the fifth value that says the district board of directors accepts complete fiduciary responsibility for all district financial actions. It's a statement that I think weighs pretty heavily on all of us. So, but the things to be truly updated are really the initiatives. So if we look at the initiative page, what we see is these initiatives have been completed and then they're pending initiatives. Let me just ask a couple of questions, if I may, about the pending initiatives. Approve and implement a CFPD board approved vegetation management plan, 2021. We have that, right?
I think there was one change made was
This past year, we updated 3 things, but
Yeah,
plan was,
yes, this plan was adopted before the vegetation management action plan was adopted.
okay. So since then, is it fair to say that we've achieved that objective?
That's correct.
Okay. Second, here's your fave, adopt a drone use policy.
We have a draft. We probably will have that December, January.
Okay, so coming right up. Are they flying?
They are, yeah, we just finished a week-long class, 12 new operators.
Woo.
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We hope there'll be an opportunity for us to see them. That really sounds very
Yeah.
exciting.
I've asked Ken Lord, he can't make it this month, but to one of the board meetings to actually come give a presentation on the program.
Thank you. Complete a location decision for new fire station 44. We should probably suspend that for a moment. We think we know, but we had nothing final's been finalized, so there it is. And increase the reserve to 10 million for the new fire station 44. Is this still something we have done, need to do, plan to do?
We have $10 set aside at Lake, it's an earmark for that. Answer your question, and then I'd say the intent of item number 19, I would suggest it has been completed, but because when this was put in strategic plan, we were examining a number of locations
Right.
and trying to find another place besides the station 44.
Right.
We eliminated all of those, so we finally decided on a location, so we had done that.
Okay, We wanna put
My
a-
answer to that.
check by that. Let's just do that for now. And then increasing the reserve, we can check that off the list too.
Yeah, I don't,
That's done.
yes, it is.
Okay, so really, if you look, so then as we look at this, we are very close to completing all of the initiatives of the strategic plan. So here is a chance to look ahead and say, what are some of the things we might include as an added set of initiatives, or whatever you would like to call them. Again, I completely respect, as a person who did strategic planning for 30 years professionally, all the agony that strategic planners can put their clients through in terms of visioning sessions and workshops and breakout meetings and all of that. Promise, that's not the intent here. The intent here is really to have a rich discussion amongst the board and bring out the best ideas for initiatives to be accomplished going forward, and to maintain our collegiality and our civility while we do it. That's the plan. Some of the ideas that have come up from this is, first of all, and again, not to drop down into the actual content today, but to talk about what do we need to do? What are the initiatives that we might pursue to create the strongest possible board? That is, what do we need to do to educate ourselves, to reformulate any of our constructs, the way that we conduct business, the way we investigate new information, how we make our decisions. But those things that will contribute to us being the strongest possible board. So it's kind of the self-improvement initiative there. Jean, by all means, and JB, please chime in here if there's anything you'd like to say or add to this. So we're looking at,
Let me ask you a question.
Yes,
What would a stronger board look like?
you know, just being sure that we have educated ourselves to be the very best representatives to accomplish the mission, to maintain the values, that are here. For example, that one value that says we the board members are responsible for all of the financial decisions that we approve, accepts complete fiduciary responsibility for all district financial actions. I'll just speak personally and say that I would like to understand more about those decisions. And every time I come to the fiscal policy meetings, I understand more. And that's the whole idea, is that all five of us have a deep understanding of the background to the financial decisions that we're approving or that we're discussing at these meetings. That's the idea. There's an education aspect to this. Right now we have committee assignments. Are those the best committee assignments we should be talking about? Are these when we go about this, should we be sharing some of those committee assignments? How are they assigned? How is the whole idea of how are we bringing forth information that allows each of the directors to have a deep knowledge of the subjects at hand?
Yeah, JB, let me jump into that question of yours also, because I think you've seen especially as I'm exiting the board soon, that you've heard me multiple times over these 6 years, but definitely the 4 years of, like, I think the committees alone need to be restructured a little bit, just to the benefit of the board and then to the community that we service. So that's one point. And again, we don't need to get into the details of that, but I think I picture, and what I've expressed to the entire board before, is maybe more of a rotation of the positions, not for us to individually stay in one. So at the end, the result hopefully would be that everybody has a broader understanding of all those touch points in the community. And I think it just gives us a deeper understanding as we sit here as a group. So that's just backing up what Cynthia is pointing out. I also will go farther. I think Gary's done a wonderful job as our board president, but I think it's left me, if I was to raise my hand and say, hey, I'd like to do that, that I wouldn't really be prepared to do that. And I think there should be a rotation and an education that we're all participating in that through each meeting, so we're strengthening our ability to do that. I think it's gonna serve the board and the community better. So those are 2 points that I would reinforce that answer.
Is there something you'd like to say to that, JB?
No, I'm just, you answered the question.
Okay, here's another area of better education for the board. To have the strongest possible co-side outcome for the CAL FIRE contract. You know, we're always talking about how to bring the contract to be, which we are responsible for managing, to be as responsive as possible to the co-side. And in some places, it's a perfect match. And in other places, as a woodland fire organization, there are things in an urban landscape that the contract has adapted to. And those are all over these papers. It's, you know, the expansion of the fire marshal's office and the different local educational aspects and the fire hydrants, you know, the building permits, the things that the contract does for the coast side that are very specifically coast side things, are very specifically more urban things. So we're interested, so one aspect of the strategic plan educational process might be, let's do a deep dive into understanding the contract so we know what are the things that we can do to make it, to be sure that it's serving the coast side in the best possible way. I mean, this is not to foment dramatic change. This is to optimize the services that we are contracting for. That is the purpose here. Another subject of the strategic plan initiative might be strengthening relationships with the community and with allied agencies. The community at this stage is experiencing some real changes. There's changes in elected officials that have to do with allied agencies. And there's changes in the community itself, that opening a new fire station, constructing a third one, that are giving us real opportunities to reach out and form stronger relationships with the community. And we have an incredible volunteer firefighting group that is ready to reach out and really be ambassadors for fire services here on the coast side. And we have a pretty amazing CERT team that just topped 2,000 people in its roster. And we have 32 neighborhoods, and we are about to, when we finish this next training period, the first 2 weeks of November, we will have opened 27 of the 32 neighborhoods to having their own grassroots self-organized safety networks in their neighborhoods, organized by their CERT teams. So this thing we have a real outreach going on, and we just want to monumentalize that, if you will, be sure that we understand that we are using these assets as best we can. Because education, public education, is a phrase that is right there in that mission. And that is something that we are all working hard to do.
Cynthia, can I jump into this one too? Because again, these are the points that you're bringing up are the points I feel like I've been saying throughout my time serving. And one of that is, I think we do a good job of that. We're open to the community. We're transparent. Sometimes there's a community participation. I do feel it's up to the community to attend these meetings and listening and participating like all the government agencies on the coast. But I still think there's space for us to put ourselves out there a little bit more visible, a little bit more communication, a little bit more messaging, a little bit more participation. We're talking as a board, not as staff, not as what staff is doing daily. And the things we don't see, that communication I feel very confident on what they're providing and the role they play in this community. But as a board, and there's so many touch points. The few things that I've participated in my role as a director, if there's one thing, one observation I've had is that all of this is based on conversation and relationships and knowing what's happening within the city, knowing what's happening on the county and with our neighbors. And if we're just gonna do this as 1 or 2 hour meetings once a month, we're missing an opportunity to strengthen the board.
Thank you so much, Steve. From my work in the region, in the neighborhoods, in the community, with the city of Half Moon Bay, with the unincorporated areas of the coastside, I feel that there is that we are at an interesting point where people are looking to form those strong relationships after perhaps a period of time where things happen separately. There is a real sense of cooperation. There is a real desire to especially coordinate emergency responses from a variety of public and private and community support agencies so that everyone here knows what their role is and how to contribute. And I continue to hear from city government, from the MCC, from these various neighborhoods. We want to all be part of a very cohesive community here because we recognize the unique conditions of the coast side, and it's a privilege to live here, but we need to be ready to respond together if things should not go as well as they might. So that whole strengthening of the allied relationships with the community. I've already mentioned reviewing the relationships with the volunteer firefighters and with Coastside CERT to say who are these groups now in relation to the big picture of the board and Coastside CERT. I think both of them have kind of blossomed actually, and how to acknowledge and harness the momentum that's been established. This might be a good time to talk about the very best ways to do that. How do we, as part of the CAL FIRE relationship, I know that there's contractual issues that we of course will be observing, but there's always that little desire to attract and retain the very best personnel. And I'm not sure exactly how we go about doing that, but I am curious about the life cycle of someone who is in fire services as a career, from the very, very beginning of how do I get in to how do I retire, and all that whole art of what happens there. And just like if you were in any sort of private, if you were in a public utility, if you were in a private corporation, if you were in a nonprofit, you would be interested in knowing what is the art of the life of your employees, their professional lives. And that's, so maybe we can understand more about that. Another issue, idea communications plan. How do we message? How do we explain ourselves and all that we do? And I know there are many different portals for that right now, many different channels that are currently in play. And again, by bringing this up, this is not a criticism of anything. It is simply, let's think about now with all of our various electronic means of communicating with people. Are we doing the best job of this? How can we, what do we want to be saying? What is our primary message? How do we update it? And how do we get the message out, when there are disruptions to our conventional telecommunications utilities, which can be, any given day around here. But that whole issue of when people know most of the things that the fire services provides to the community, but not all of them. And I don't know that, there's such a good feeling about fire services here amongst the community. What are the key elements of what they appreciate? I think we know them, but have we ever actually asked? And what else, have we done best practices with other organizations around us, to be fire organizations, to be sure other programs that we are incorporating in each of these levels best practices? And how do we reflect that through a communications plan. So those are just some ideas. You know, there's some specific things like Old 41 and New 44, and those things that we can, of course, continue to discuss. But I put this out there in hopes that the board would feel that a discussion of these issues is merits further development, and that we could actually begin that process at a separate session, either in December or wherever. And whether the outcome of that is, once we identify what the key elements are we'd like to explore, whether you want to form a committee or a work group or whatever you want to call it, whatever is in the correct context here, that we just take this list, of initiatives that we've almost completed, and move this forward into the next edition. And because this thing is called strategic plan, that's what we'll continue to call.
And for you, Bruce, we talked before you arrived, the purpose of this meeting was really just as like, should we take the time, and is there a need to go into these issues and kind of as a group, strategize, like have a broader conversation, give it a few hours or however much time to kind of think beyond the way that we're doing it now as it relates to this strategic plan for the board. So,
Okay.
you know, we weren't getting into the details of any one thing that was needed, but whether or not, is there a need to pursue this? I feel strongly there is, but
I heard you speaking that.
Yeah.
I need to give that some more thought.
right,
Because, I mean, people know what we do.
right.
The CERT program's going great guns, and that's a great PR move right there on its own, on top of helping the community. Old 41, New 44. I don't know, I just need to wrap my head around a little bit more.
Sure, and hopefully a dedicated meeting and a broader conversation will allow the 5 board members to do that. And to
Strategic.
communicate that in front of the fire chief of having his input of like, well, here's the direction we're already going, you know, whatever input that is. But so this is really about, is there a need for this?
Chief Cox, do they have an informational exposure like this down in Santa Cruz or over the hill, or
When you say informational exposure, what are you thinking?
what they're talking about, having a community meeting or or an outreach committee, I would call it, or?
It's an internal meeting. It's a board committee meeting that would plan to say, these are the things we want to do.
Right,
If in accomplishing those things, meetings with stakeholders becomes an appropriate course of action, sure. But that's not the intent in this. This is to outline what we'd like to accomplish.
Yeah, so I think in my experience, there's a couple of different mechanisms that this goes. Operationally, anything to do with operations usually comes down to a standards of cover plan, and standards of cover is looking at, do you have the right equipment, the right stations, that get the right parts of the district in the right amount of time. I'm actually not as concerned about a standards of cover, just because when the original 41 plan was done for the new 41, it was almost incorporated into there, and they said, your stations are almost perfectly placed, you have the right apparatus, and we've only improved since then. The other study that tends to take place is just a third-party master plan. And a master plan goes a little bit deeper into issues that might be there. But it really gets at, is it a solution looking for a problem? Or is the problem actually, or I guess, what is defining the problem, right? And if the problem is there's no strategic direction for the board, then thinking about it at a board level makes sense as far as a board, what do we want to do? I think once it dives down into operations, then it kind of turns into a different type of study.
sure, it
And-
runs its own.
And we don't want to, the strategic plan is separate from the operational plan,
Right.
which is, this guides the operational plan and we stay out of that.
Right.
Or we have stayed out of it, maybe I didn't mean to put it like that. That's a little cavalier. The point is, we're not proposing at this is not an operational plan proposition. This is a proposal to expand the initiatives of the strategic plan.
And for me, when you talk about a third party, the first thing that comes to my mind is an architect. And when you're dealing with an architect, he puts his dream on paper for you to give the okey dokey. It's like, that's not what I wanted. So I have a problem with third parties unless it's a real specialty.
And we weren't proposing a third party at all.
I know Jonathan just brought it up, so I
Oh,
was
sorry.
commenting on that.
I have to laugh because I came from architecture.
Ah.
And they're a very large architectural firm who believed you had to listen to the clients first. And then develop the plan from there so that you didn't get plans and go, oh God, that's not what I wanted.
My neighbor's got a house that is not her, that she had drawn up and remodeled, and it's like, are you kidding me? This is not you.
Not you.
Yeah, one thing I always think back to is as board members, especially in the district model, you represent a part of the community, right? What is it that part of the community is desiring in the district? Right? Is it communication? Is it a newsletter? Is it more social media? Is it understanding the CAL FIRE contract? I think that when I look for direction, I would look at you as a representative of that part of the district and what is that part of the district seeking.
Let me just mention a couple of items. So first of all, preface it by saying, as far as participating in any kind of process to examine and look at different ways of doing it, I think is healthy, and I certainly support doing that without knowing exactly what that would entail. But let me just go back a little bit. A strategic plan to me, and 100 years ago, I actually conducted some of them. And but it's really based on a strategy. If the organization has a strategy of what they want to do, then you establish a strategic plan to get you to fulfill that strategy. That's really what you're trying to do. And without going through ancient history, there was a time here in this district that we were all over full. I mean, it was, you've heard all the horror stories of doing that. And we had a strategy, various board people at that time, we could get this thing straightened out. We're going to do some things that need to be done very clearly. And so some of the strategic items, some of the earlier plans were pretty obvious things that needed to be done. For example, one of the first things was that Ugly Bridge, Point Montero, and Hatton Bay. I mean, it was a battle every single meeting. Where the hell are we going to do? How much did you pay for this coffee pot and all that type of thing? It was bad. It was so bad that we had a strategic item, fire our legal counsel, not Gene. This is the
Thank goodness, Gene.
Gene has done an absolutely magnificent job, but we fired the one who we needed to get something done because it was obviously not a strategy. That person wasn't doing what we had to do. The district was providing, we had our own ambulance. It was a disaster. So we had to get rid of that. And so we joined the JLS, KPA, and all that type of thing to do it. The hiring of CAL FIRE was a huge strategic issue that divided the community from every way, but it was a strategic plan that the board agreed on to go forward and to do that type of thing. Without go through all this type of things. What you see here today is kind of the version that was written, if you will. I think this was actually written, and I frankly recognize a lot of the wordage here. So it was written really after we kind of got over the hurdle, and then we're really kind of getting some to do things. And even though I repeat, I'm willing to entertain and look at various types of things, I must admit that my focus is on what is our job to do.
Right.
Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, if there's some, if you look at the vision statement, what's in here, if there's some new proposal or idea that contributes to that vision statement, well, I'm considering it. But, you know, I don't view my goal as a board member is to try to engage the entire coast side in a number of different things. I have a very focused view as to what we want to do. I mean, operationally and financially to get the job done that we have to do it. I've said a number of times that I think our job is to have a strategic plan, to make sure that we have all the policies in place that we want to do, that we want to have our finances in place, and that we oversight the contracts, and that we don't create the contract for the CAL FIRE, but we have oversight to make sure they're doing their job, and the annual or 6-month revision that the chief goes through is he accomplishing the operating plan is certainly a part of that. So in terms of some of the things that have been discussed, I think that what background thing that you mentioned needs to be updated, no question about it. Frankly, I copied that out of something else at the period of time to do that type of thing. The community restructuring and that type of thing is fine. Frankly, there hasn't been a hell of a lot of interest on board members serving on, you know, different committees, you know, to try to do it. But I mean, the points and why you justify that, I can't dispute that at all. In terms of understanding the CAL FIRE contract, we could have somebody go through it and review it and so forth, but it's in our packet, you know, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, to change it is not gonna happen. I mean, that's what
Not
we're
trying
gonna
to
do.
change it,
Yeah, no, I understand.
trying to understand.
I understand, yeah, what the latitudes are and all that. And CAL FIRE, frankly, in a couple of areas when there's been some little bit of confusion, they've been very lenient in terms of changing things and making it more equitable, easier for them as well as for us. I mean, they've certainly done a good job. You mentioned the other one, the additional, I don't know if this is the word you're thinking of, but involvement or use of CERT and the volunteers and so forth. And I have a little bit of concern as to how that will be done. Not that I'm opposed to it at all, but they're both 501c3 organizations, independent, their own boards, their own finances and all that. And we sponsor CERT, we sponsor the volunteers as well we should, certainly great organization to do it. But beyond that as to what and how we would do, I would have to be shown how that would work out to our benefit, but I'm not, again, I can't say anything that I'm absolutely no way it's,
Okay,
to do that type of thing.
well, that's all you could possibly ask for, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah, this
No.
this was and I'm not, this is not an ego trip, but this was a one-person document. Nobody had any interest in it. I mean, we had, I remember, I kind of wish if you remember JD that at one time we took the board, I forget who was on it, we went over to East Bay someplace and had a day-long strategic plan session. Disaster. It was awful. But so it's, but as far as having.
Don't worry, we promise not to do that.
No, I know. But in terms of, you know, reasonable people getting together, figuring out what's right for us within the parameters that we just don't become the United Way of the coast side.
No, sir, that's
then,
not an objective.
then maybe that's all.
Yeah, I think we're in a unique
That
position.
sounds like a yes to me, I'll go with that, thank you.
I think, I still, my career came from a fire district. Now I've served on a board as a board director in a fire district. But, and then you take the element of CAL FIRE being our contractor to a district, which happens all across the state. I don't know how many numbers it is. But I think one thing that's lacking from me personally, and then if I was going to continue to serve was like, and I've tried to recommend to the board, it's like, let's try to get in, let's try to see what those other fire districts are that have CAL FIRE contracts and what they do. and this might be a perfect example of like, how do they treat their strategic plan of the board within their being a district and having a contract with CAL FIRE? I don't think we look at that enough of like, in other words, ways to like do it better than we're doing it. And maybe we'll find that we're, as a fire district and as a board, we do it better than any other contract situation. But I don't know that. I mean, that's one outreach, I think, is like, that's why I recommended it not only being part of the special districts, but part of the California fire districts. So somehow you're able to have those conversations, or at least the relationships to call somebody in another county and say, how are you guys dealing with this? Right now, I don't know if anybody else on the board has that understanding or has ever had those conversations, but I think it's a disservice to not know that, honestly.
And benchmarking and best practices is always.
CAL FIRE, at one time hosted a meeting of, those districts that had
Right.
contracts with CAL FIRE. And, I attended a couple of them, wasn't, light bulbs did not go off, but you had a chance to meet with people, and
Right.
talk to people and all that. They've not had that, and for whatever reason, they've discontinued, but maybe there's a way to say that CAL FIRE, it's not in the contract, or what do you think of having such a meeting, with a approved agenda up front?
Exactly. And Chief Cox, if what's your experience from where you've moved up through the agency? Do you feel that there's any benefit to that, right? So I'm sitting here with telling you directly that I could see where that would be a benefit, but I've never experienced that. You see a spot where that would benefit this board and this community?
Yeah, it's a good question. There is, and Chief Armstrong over here in a minute, he'll probably be able to give you more info. There is something called there's a Cooperative Government Contracts Committee within our agency.
Okay.
LGAC, Local Cooperative Agency Group. And it's a representative from a local contract in Northern California, one from Southern California, a unit chief, which Chief Armstrong sits on, as well as the Sacramento staff. And they look more at kind of policies, the whole cooperating policy contracts
Right.
process. But there is a group within CAL FIRE, a committee that meets to discuss kind of cooperative contract issues. I don't know, I've never heard or seen in my time here, a meeting of bringing boards together. You have to imagine, we deal with boards from Riverside County that have a $300 million a year contract and 110 stations,
Right.
to an all volunteer group in Southern Monterey County that has 9 volunteer companies that we manage, and everything in between.
Right.
So there's a lot of
Right.
different kind of variability there. But I think, strategic planning is a thing within the fire services, obviously. I actually had a really good conversation with a chief in the county talking about strategic plans during the week, and I really liked his advice, which was, don't do a strategic plan because you want to do a strategic plan. Do a strategic plan and focus on the things you want to get better at.
Right.
And I was like, that's a really good takeaway,
Exactly what we have
right?
to
Like,
do.
what do I want to get better at?
Right.
And I thought that was a kind of a good synopsis of what a strategic plan is.
No, there's so many ways over the strategic planning mountain, and-
Yeah.
And we don't need any bells and whistles. We don't need to formalize it. We don't need to bring in outside situations. We don't need to torture anybody with this. We just need to address the issues that we feel are the things which will build on the excellent work that's been done all these years by this board. And this is just, we've come to the end of our list, so let's, what's our next steps? And I appreciate your yes and your openness.
Let me just make a suggestion. Number one,
Sure.
what the captain or whatever you said just described, I think basically what he said, another way of saying that, figure out a strategy as you're following, and then back it up with a strategic plan. That's what we're trying to do that. And I would just suggest that if the board chooses to have another one of these to follow on, that you really focus on what is our vision and mission. And if there's something in there that you think might be, needs to be changed and so forth, let me tell you, there's blood all over that one that's there currently. But if you think that, I would just say that that would be a good place to see if there's, because whatever we do, I think ought to be contained within that vision and statements, what is on there, and just as a place to start.
Absolutely, excellent, excellent direction, thank you.
Yeah, that's somewhat challenging because the wording's direct, but it doesn't have many boundaries, right? It's interpretation.
Well, what preceded it would have filled that page.
No, absolutely. But honestly, this community is a decade past that.
Yeah.
And I share that fear of engaging the community in a way that's going to move us backwards in any way, or bring forward an element that's not going to be to the benefit of the community or this board or the district.
But I would suggest to you, that one way to look at it is if you say to engage the community, how is it going to improve the services that we provide?
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
Right.
That's the.
Oh, absolutely. And if it doesn't fit under that, then I wouldn't feel it'd be appropriate.
Okay.
But I think it's hard to have a strategic plan, whether it's an organizational level or a board level. We have 10 minutes to, without asking for input on a broader scale, right? That's usually a big part of a strategic plan, is that you're getting the input from those that participate and those that have expectations. I understand the hesitancy of that, and I also understand that as a board, any community member at any time, whether they represent local government or just individuals, have the ability to stand in front of this board and voice their concerns and voice what they think needs to be added or is a deficit. That I've never, on the time that I've served on this board, that to my remembrance of having a community member or local governments or any other partners express that we're not doing that. So,
Well, look, if there's, I think there's a little bit more that wants to be said here. Why don't we ask, and if you wouldn't mind, Cynthia, put your thoughts down in terms of what an agenda might look like for a similar kind of thing. Trying to, rather than just brainstorm everything, try to be just specific that we could address and see what we can come up with.
So we're talking about the meeting we originally discussed for December, which is I could take all of these ideas that we presented today, plus any others that come up, and I can tie them directly back to our mission,
Yeah.
our vision and our values.
Yeah, and I would
And start
personally
to talk
ask that
about
at the bottom of that is, an action plan as to what.
Wouldn't you want to know what they?
Well,
are
if you would take whatever we come up with,
Yes.
and at the end of that, you would make some recommendations for action, and then we can really get a teeth into some, whatever. I don't even-
Absolutely.
Okay,
I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. okay.
Okay, do we vote?
I don't think we need to vote, we're gonna do it.
We're just gonna do it. Good. That's the best way
Okay.
forward.
JB, any input before?
No, I'm comfortable where we are. I think let's not have change just for the purpose of change. Let's have change if it will improve the service that goes to the people who live here. And if it doesn't pass that test, then I don't see any reason to do it.
Absolutely.
Certainly.
And Jean, how do you feel about all of this?
I think it's a terrific discussion and looking forward to ways in which to improve upon things that are already on an incredibly upward trajectory that was outlined by President Burke. The difference between when I arrived and was appointed as your attorney and where you sit today is an incredible change. And you should be very, very proud of where you've gotten to. And I think the things you're talking about will just lead to the next level of improvement for the citizens of the district.
I'd like to make one other observation, if I may. This is the second deliberative body I have sat on, the first one being the Airline Pilots Association, which I did for more years than I care to remember. And we had a constituency that was very interested in what we did. And one of the metric I came up with, not because I'm smart, because of years of observing it, when you're doing what everyone wants, no one comes to the meetings. The second you start doing things that the membership doesn't want, or if there is another area where the membership wants something that they don't see happening, believe me, you have lots of folks at the meetings. And that's kind of an ongoing test of how are you doing? Well, a number of years ago, going back as far as 2006, 2007, believe me, there were plenty of people coming to the Coastside Fire Protection District meetings. In fact, they had to be moved over the apparatus floor to accept them all. And some of these meetings went until 2 in the morning. Now, thanks to Steve, we do have some people prior to him being elected to the board. Thanks to Steve, we could count on 1 and sometimes 2 people in the audience that were otherwise didn't have an ad hoc interest in being there. So I think we have an ongoing measurement of how we're doing by just how many people come to the meetings. And I think Gary could probably share some stories about what it was like back when the public was not happy with what the district was doing.
Okay, well, I think we have direction and understanding. It's been a fruitful hour. Thank you very much, Cynthia, very much. Therefore, without objection, we are adjourned in this special meeting.
Excellent.